this exciting episode, we end Season 4 with a host of fireworks. Buckle up as we ascend to 20,000 feet for Perry Mason, Season 4, Episode 28.
The Case of the Guilty Clients.
Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose, pretty simple, provide an audio companion to every episode of television's greatest legal drama, Perry Mason. Each episode, we give you a summary of the plot. We even compare plots with the Earl Stanley Gardner novel, if the episode was an adaptation. We give you a little trivia, reveal the episode's theme, and revel in a Perry proverb. That's a pearl of wisdom from the man himself. Before we head to the water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of our fave legal cruise adventures. But first, say it with me, to the law library! Each time we visit the law library, we discuss a legal conundrum from Perry's case that helps us set future precedents. In this trip to the law library, we inquire about additional charges. You know, it's only occasionally we get someone who commits a crime, but then isn't subsequently the murderer. As we leave the Case of the Guilty Clients, we've got an oily businessman on the make named Laramie Walker, who, well, go ahead and tell him, Perry.
This is Sergeant Bryce. He has a warrant for your arrest.
Arrest? On what grounds?
Conspiracy to defraud, industrial sabotage.
So what kind of sentences would old Walker get if convicted? Well, let's talk about the specific charges first. Tampering with an airplane, that is, hiring someone to crash an airplane, that's a federal offense, U.S. Code 32. That'll run you 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Then vandalism, or the destruction of someone else's property. Well, that's California Penal Code 594. $10,000 in fines and 3 years in a state prison. Finally, his fraud constitutes grand theft because more than $1,000 were at stake. That makes it a felony, so he's due for another couple years in the slammer plus a monetary fine. That's CPC 532. I wonder if they'll let you keep the mustache, Walker. Now, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Guilty Clients. Dateline County Courthouse. Another set of not-so-happy Perryland spouses getting out while the getting's good. We open on a woman named Concepcion who doesn't quite know the word for.
When they were having guests for an out-of-door barbering?
Barbecue?
Yes, thank you, barbecue.
What's the charge? In the case of Jeff versus Lola Bronson, the question isn't whether or not Jeff hit Lola, but whether or not he enjoyed it?
Well, Your Honor, I'm not just going to stay here and let her make me into some kind of a sadist.
You are a sadist.
Eesh. Judge approves the divorce, and that's that. Lola gets picked up outside the court by a dude in a convertible who turns out to be...
Bill Ryder, our chief test pilot. Well, that's that. Goodbye, Lola.
And Jeff, don't call me Charles Bronson, has this to say.
She wanted to get rid of me so bad that she probably would have given me the stock itself if I'd asked for it.
Just what is this Bronson aircraft product that Jeff et al. Are so excited about? It's an executive airplane. You know, jet setting for the jet set. The oily Mr. Walker shows up to the airfield hoping to get a piece of the action.
Why not insure, Mr. Bronson? $100,000 for half of your share of the company. $50,000 to Patton for half of his share. Now, if the plane is successfully tested, we all share in the bonanza.
Bronson wants to make sure his man Courtney Patton isn't trying to soft pedal Mr. Walker to him. Tell us what you know, Courtney.
Court, you haven't already accepted Walker's offer, have you?
Huh? No, of course not.
Good.
Bill takes off into the wild blue yonder with Lola in tow. Mrs. Bill shows up. She and Jeff decide to tie one on.
Well, then get out another glass, Dad. We're going to drink a confusion.
A confusion?
Yeah. To Lola and Bill.
Why include Lola?
Oh, Why not? Bill's been buzzing around it like a bee around a daffodil for the last 6 months. Or didn't you know that?
No, I didn't. I've had other problems. All right. To Lola and Bill. A confusion.
A confusion.
Up in the air, Bill don't care. He turns out to be a first-class schnook. Don't drink and fly, you dope.
Let's celebrate.
Celebrate what?
Oh, you being a free woman and me about to come into a big inheritance.
Bill, what are you doing? The plane will crash.
Not a chance. It's an automatic pilot.
Plus, he's plotting something sinister with that backseat parachute, and he's a masher.
How about a little gratitude in advance? You know, Lola, ever since I saw you down in Argentina that day, you've had me in a tailspin. Now that Jeffy's gone bye-bye,
Bill, don't. Stop it!
Creepfest USA, this guy can only use flight metaphors in his corny pickup lines. You've got me in a tailspin? You've got to be kidding me. Later that night, Bill shows up drunk at Concepcion's joint looking to talk with Lola.
She is a silly, no-use, extravagant dame. But I brought her here from Argentina and lived with her for 3 years, and I feel responsible for her. Like you would a stray cat that you picked up.
Stray cat, am I? Silly, no use, extravagant. Well, let me tell you what you are. A stupid ox. And as far as Bill Ryder goes, I will see him when, how, and as often as I like. So?
We got a case of Bill versus Lola. They seem incapable of letting the other see their own weaknesses. We then cut to the airfield where Bill's going to test out the high-class jet. Everything's writing on this puppy. And then give us the sales ad copy while you're at it. Courtney.
You know, that's not only the speed, it's the streamlining. Modular flow, Jeff calls it.
I know.
You know, if we can just pass these tests today, we can capture the executive plane market for the whole country, Lola. And the way Jeff's increased the speed...
I know all that, Court.
I'd hire a professional, Courtney. Lola and Walker are both in attendance. Here comes the wind-up and the pitch.
375, 400. Yeah, I got some vibration in the tail section. Ailerons aren't working. Pieces falling off the wings.
Bill, pull out.
You know, Jeff's basically a good guy when he tells Bill to pull out instead of going through with the test when things start flying off the wings, at least according to Bill. Doesn't really matter, though. The plane crashes, Bill parachutes to safety, and Courtney sums up the predicament they're all in.
I don't know, but it's a major disaster for all of us. And for the company.
Lola's upset. She and Concepcion talk shop. Concepcion wants to head home. Lola, not so much.
I'm not so sure about the estancia, Conception. Aren't you going back to Argentina? Of course I am. But I put nearly $300,000 into Jeff's company, part of which I borrowed. And to pay it back, it may be necessary to sell my land, that's all.
That's all? Lola. And O'Higgins has been estanciero in that part for over 100 years.
Oh, for heaven's sake, I'm fed up with ranch life, and it's my money, isn't it?
Of course. I forget I'm only your poor cousin. But I'm also an O'Higgins.
Wait a minute. The family name is O'Higgins? Mr. Walker shows up in a, well, you guessed it, oily suit and unctuously offers $50,000 for the Bronson stock. No sale, says Lola.
I think you'd better leave, Mr. Walker.
You're refusing my offer?
I'm asking you to leave right now.
Concepcion isn't happy about it. But is she ever happy? She's a poor cousin, after all.
Bill and Violet,
meanwhile, talk out their marriage woes, but never get around to talking about Violet's wig. Violet, she drives a hard bargain.
All right, you win. You'll get your cut, Violet. Only take
half.
Half? All right, half. Only get out of here. Use the French doors, will you?
Lola shows up just as Violet exits stage left, and she wants info. Bill reluctantly coughs it up.
Look, just between you and me, maybe I didn't fly that plane as good as I could have.
Lola pulls a gun, but Bill's tricky. The gun goes off. Bill, the actor, plays dead, and Lola panics. Cue the horns! Next thing you know, Jeff's the one in Bill's den pulling the trigger, taking things off of the body. wiping Lola's fingerprints off of glasses and making the entire scene look like a robbery while the telephone plaintively rings. In Perry's office, Concepcion talks to Perry and Paul about a missing Lola.
Out at the Ryder place.
Perry schools Paul in detective work. It all seems so intuitive for Perry.
From the look of things, I'd say that Ryder discovered a prowler, struggled with him, and got killed in the process.
Somehow I don't think so, Paul.
Perry's calling the police, and while he's talking, Trag walks in.
Well, that's good of you to call me, Perry. Normally, you're not quite so thoughtful.
As Perry and Paul leave the premises, Paul confirms Perry's detective work. We already knew, Paul.
You were right. It wasn't a burglary. Glass only on the outside.
Broken from the inside.
And if Trag hasn't already seen that, he will soon. We better move.
Perry goes a-calling, and Lola's in denial.
I was never in the house at all. I did drive there, but at the door I heard voices, and I just went away.
Liar, liar, liar. All right. If you had Paul reaching Perry on someone else's phone somewhere in the episode in your pre-episode bingo game, give yourself a high five.
Hello? Yes, he's here. Mr. Drake.
Thank you.
Jeff, not Lola, gets arrested for the murder, and in court, Hamilton Berger proceeds to call a pathologist, Lieutenant Trag, some guy listed in the cast as Astronomer Finney, a bow-tied mustachio gent. Great memory on this guy. He told me so himself.
You're sure about remembering the number?
Excellent memory.
There's Clarence Keller, the air traffic controller. There's Violet Ryder. And then, of course, we head back to Lieutenant Trag, whose testimony starts a fight between Lola and Jeff, who continue their penchant for marital tiffs by fighting in court over which one killed Ryder. Only they're each taking responsibility. You didn't murder him, I murdered him. No, you didn't murder him, I murdered him.
We fought over the gun and I shot him. Then I tried to make it look like a burglary.
That isn't true. I did it. I killed him.
It's all confusing. In Hamburger's office, Lola and Jeff give dueling stories, and Della ends the whole thing by expressing the obvious.
Well, one thing is certain. They can't both be guilty.
Perry and Della confront Violet. She leads them to Courtney, and we've got another dude drinking to a confusion.
Oh, now look, Mr. Mason, I didn't know anything about that. That wreck cost me plenty, because I still had stock in the company then.
Hamilton decides he's going after Jeff, not Lola, but when Paul gives Perry some telephone records, Perry's got the killer in hand. At the airport, Mr. Walker meets Concepcion and Lola and plans to take a little trip down Argentina way. Unfortunately for him, Perry shows up.
Mr. Walker?
Mason.
Afraid you're going to miss your flight, Mr. Walker. This is Sergeant Bryce. He has a warrant for your arrest.
Mr. Walker reveals he hoped to get some stock from Lola, and Lola, well, she's shocked. Concepcion says she'll explain on the plane. Perry says, Concepcion, please don't feign. Lola, you only scrambled Bill's brain. And Concepcion, it's you who's to blame.
You called Jeff not from the hotel, but from Ryder's house, after Ryder was dead. We have a record of that telephone call.
Here's her story.
He laughed when I told him that you were going back to South America with me. He laughed. He took my arm and he twisted it. And I shot him.
We have an authentic denouement in the courtroom.
Only now, the banks are lending Jeff the money to build the plane himself.
Things are looking up for Jeff. And in the back of the court, Jeff and Lola are making up by making out. Let's see how long all that lasts. We still haven't heard them say two kind words to each other. I'm not guessing very long. Call me a pessimist. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. Adela is a deep dive on an actor or actress who guest starred in the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. As Bill Ryder takes the plane up for a test,
Jeff and Courtney
start bragging about the plane.
We're asking the FAA for a certification for 18,000 feet. We want to make sure the plane has a little left to spare.
2 things here. First, is the FAA regulation that Jeff cites accurate? Is it the same now? And second, what's all this talk about module airflow? Is that real or is that just TV talk for that jet goes really fast? Tell us what you find, Pauls. Our Della for this episode is everybody's least favorite macking pilot, Guy Mitchell, a.k.a. Bill Ryder.
All right, Violet. You want the unvarnished truth? We are through. Have been for months.
Here's 10 about Guy. Born Al Cernick, Detroit, Michigan, 1927 to Yugoslavian immigrant parents. Number 2, when he was 11, family moved to Los Angeles. He auditioned for Warner Brothers. The company groomed him to be a child star. His film career was delayed when the family moved to San Francisco, but there he regularly appeared on the radio shows of Dude Martin, a country singer. Number 3, served briefly in the Navy in 1945. Number 4, got out of the military and joined Carmen Cavallero's band in 1946. Number 5, won an Arthur Godfrey Talent Scouts Award in 1949, which helped secure a contract with Columbia Records, who at the time was under the direction and distinctive style of Mitch Miller. When Frank Sinatra refused to record 2 songs for Columbia Records while the band was waiting in the studio, Miller, who had heard Mitchell sing on demonstration records, called him in as a last-minute substitute. Mitchell got the gig. He was often featured in duets with Rosemary Clooney on the song You're Just in Love, taken from the Broadway musical called Call Me Madam, and in a number of other songs with Minnie Carson and Paul Whiteman.
Number 6,
he achieved early success with songs like My Heart Cries for You and The Roving Kind, and in the UK had number 1 hits like She Wears Red Feathers and Look at That Girl. According to one critic, the British success of She Wears Red Feathers was because of the bizarre nature of its storyline, which concerned an English banker's love for a hula hula girl.
I worked in the London bank, respectable position. From 9 to 3 they serve you tea, but ruin your disposition.
Number 7,
his signature song was Singin' the Blues. By the 1950s, it appeared Mitchell's folk-influenced successes and chart career, they were drying up. But then he got his biggest success by covering Marty Robbins' rhythm and blues plus country classic, Singin' the Blues.
Well, I never felt more like singing the blues, 'cause I never thought that I'd ever lose your love. Why'd you do me this way?
It topped the U.S. charts for 10 weeks. Number 8, Mr. Mitchell also worked as a movie actor. Starred with Rhonda Fleming, Gene Barry, Agnes Moorehead, and Teresa Brewer in Those Redheads from Seattle. For 3 months in 1957, he was the host of a variety series called The Guy Mitchell Show. And in the early 1960s, he played a detective called George Romack in a short-lived NBC series called Whispering Smith. This was his only Perry Mason appearance. Number 9, personal life, married 3 times. First, to former Miss USA Jackie Lockheed. Second, to former Miss Denmark Elsa Sorensen. And then third, to Betty. That's all I could find out about Betty. Her name was Betty, and he was married to her for 25 years. When number 10, he died in 1999 after spending his last years in Las Vegas. Our Perry for this episode concerns our man's role in the divorce. He drew up the divorce papers to make sure Bronson Aircraft didn't get hosed. What are friends for, after all?
Perry, thanks for coming out. She signed the agreement just as you drew it up.
I gathered that from the fact you weren't contesting. And there was no objection to giving you a 90-day option on her company stock.
On another note, Perry draws the line of getting a drink with a client after a case.
Shall we get a drink or something?
I'd better get back to Los Angeles, Jeff.
He knows Jeff is going to drink to a confusion. Not for Perry! Speaking of drinking to a confusion, confusion's our theme. Boy, we've got a lot of it going on in this episode. Lola and Jeff don't know whether they love or hate each other. Bill and Violet are a match made in Dante's Inferno. Courtney's confused about his loyalties. Walker doesn't want the plane for itself. He's just committing sabotage and fraud so he can eventually get a buyout. Isn't there an easier way to make a buck, buddy? And Concepcion O'Higgins? I think the name kind of says it all. She wants the estancia, and as soon as she said she was a poor cousin, I knew she was going to be the murderer. Being around all that cash when you've got none yourself is a quick way to get confused in Perryland. You know who's never mixed up, though? Perry, that's who. Let's hear our last proverb from him in Season 4. Well, Jeff thanks Perry for showing up in court, and here's a Perry adage for that classic 365-day calendar of Perry wisdom I'm sure you're making.
Old friend in court never hurts.
You know, it's true, and when that friend is the kind of guy who can also help you get out of a murder jam, it's especially good when he's by your side in court. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Each time we visit the water cooler, we give you deleted scenes. Ideas from the script that didn't make the final cut. This time we've got number 1, Concepcion's bit of not knowing the American word just keeps on going. She's going to need the word for, what do you call it, jail, attorney, legal fees? You get the idea. Number 2, Violet tries out various wigs and then compares sagebrush chic and sassy city hairpieces. Number 3, Lola and Jeff aren't ready for children, so they find a stray kitten to take care of. We already know Jeff's got a responsible streak. Alas, they fight over the little tyke, who they dub Test Pilot. Our Paul from the last episode involved young David Gideon's reading habits.
What's that? Blackstone? Yeah. Say, the moths really fly out of that one, don't they?
What other book, other than Blackstone, could the guy have been reading that would have signified, hey, I want to be a lawyer? Aunt Mai wrote in to say she liked Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, Sonia Sotomayor's memoir, My Beloved World. Good choices. She also sent along a link from the UCLA library that lists books on women and law. I'll leave that link in the show notes. Thanks, Aunt Mai. I guess I was thinking of something a little bit older than To Kill a Mockingbird or My Beloved World. You know, Blackstone's commentary on the laws of England hails from the second half of the 18th century. I mean, this is obvious, but I'd be walking around with a volume from the Corpus Juris Secundum. That's the official encyclopedia of American law, and you may know it best from the closing credits of Perry Mason. They were originally published between 1914 and 1947. David could have grabbed a copy and carried it around like he was actually doing something with it. And if you really want to go old school, you could do worse than Edward Coke's Institutes of the Laws of England from the early 17th century, known familiarly as Coke on Littleton. What are you reading, David? Oh, just a little Coke on Littleton. You know, 'cause I want to be a lawyer. Happy reading, David. It's time for a quick listener letter. In a response to the Paul prompt, Aunt Mai included this note, quote, I like the question asking how you create the podcast. I like very much your description of your preparation for each episode. I knew you did a lot, but I didn't know how much. Close quote. Thanks as always for writing in, Aunt Mai. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have a comment on the episode or the pod in general? Drop me a line at theperrypod@gmail.com. And join us next time, as for the first time in over 2 years, we actually take a look at a Perry Mason movie. We just covered the case of the grumbling grandfather, where a former Mason client becomes a future Mason aide. Well, everything old is new again. It's 1989, and we've got the first appearance of Ken Molansky in the case of the lethal lesson. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat!